Hey yo, it's your girl Erin, and today I wanted to talk about why I think mutualism is the biggest enemy of socialism. So, basically, to begin with, I guess I should say, what do I mean by socialism? Well, I mean an economy that is driven by social need and not capital. So, the reason why people engage in economic activity under socialism is not so that they can exchange their labor or their produce for something else, but rather it is to meet a social need. And so distribution becomes about need instead of about affordability. So when I say socialism, a lot of people will think that for something to be socialist, all it has to do is for it to have workers owning the means of production. What that means is if the workers control the workplace, so like let's say you work in a factory, if everyone in the factory working there shares in ownership of the factory. Now, that is something that's important, because without that, if somebody else controls it and is telling the workers what to do, that's just exploitation. If they have to follow orders and they have to do what other people say, instead of being able to choose where to send, what to spend their labor on, and to be able to have control of what they produce. They don't have to give what they made over to someone else, but they get to choose what to do with it. That's important, and I would argue that that's an example of a social need. As people in society, we have a need to be in control of our workplace. We have a need for our labor to be up to us to decide what we spend it on, what we spend our labor on, and what like how we spend it, what we spend it on, and what to do with what we produce. That is a social need. So in a socialist society, it's true that the workers will own the means of production, because the economy will be based on social need, and there is no social need in hierarchy. There's no social need in telling other people what to do. There's no social need to have some people produce things and then give it to someone else to decide what to do with it. We have a social need to have control over what we work and have control over the produce and what happens to it, for that not to go to someone else. That's a social need. Socialism does answer that, but it's not just that. There are far more social needs than just to own the means of production. And if you own the means of production, but the entire rest of your economy is against social need, then how can you call that economy socialist? Just one single part of it is socialist. So in a socialist society, you wouldn't have markets or exchange, because there's no social value to that way of doing things. To produce things, to exchange them, goes against social need, because it becomes up to who has the exchange power to afford something rather than who needs it. So economic activity under capitalism and capitalism similar economies happens because you have the prospect of exchange, and then you're going to use your labor or the produce you make and exchange it for something else, and it becomes about who has the ability to exchange, who has that exchange power. And economic activity is triggered by whether you can get an exchange that you like out of your actions, not does it meet a social need. If you are running a corporation, if there's money, there's markets, and the workers do own the means of production, well, you're still only going to do things that are profitable. If everybody on Earth needs a respirator because we polluted the air so much, if it's a social need that everyone has a respirator, but instead of the production taking place based on the social need, it becomes who has the ability to exchange for it. And if you don't have enough exchange power, you don't get the gas mask or whatever, you don't get to breathe clean air. Only people who can afford to exchange for it can get clean air. Now, so in capitalism, it's based on affordability. Now, I would argue that mutualism is the biggest enemy of socialism. And the reason why is because people who are mutualists generally know that capitalism is a failed system. They generally accept that capitalism is not in the social need, it's not in social interest, and it has flaws and leads to exploitation. But instead of going to an economy that is different from capitalism, it isn't based on the same way of thinking, it isn't based on the same pattern of behavior where you go and you do a labor or you produce something so that you get something out of it, and then you take what you got out of it and you change it for something else you need, and that's how the economy is done. Instead of doing things that way, whether it's capitalism, mutual credits, labor notes, whatever you want to call it, if it's something that you exchange for and then use to exchange for something else, that is capital. That is a capitalist economy. And the reason it's bad is not just because it gatekeeps people based on affordability. It also changes our perception. It changes our mode of thinking. When we see a social need under a economy that's based on exchange, instead of asking ourselves, can I meet that need? You'll ask yourself, can meeting that need get you exchange value that then you can then use to meet your needs? Instead of economic activity being based on whether society needs the thing, it's based on whether the individuals in the society have the exchange power to get the thing. And so people who are mutualists, well, what is mutualism? Well, part of the problem is every single mutualist you ask will have a different answer. But what they all have in common is they all think it's okay for there to be exchange. They think it's okay for for the economy to be made up of exchange. They think markets are fine. They'll often say mutualism is socialist because under mutualism, workers own the means of production. Now, they are not free to have their needs met unless they exchange stuff, but somehow social need, that's not considered what makes up socialism. Literally just if it's a worker co-op or not. And this is in my opinion, one of the worst possible positions, because at least if someone's a capitalist, then, and they're open about it, you can argue with them like, no, we need something different. We need an economy that's based on social need. We need to stop doing things for exchange. And although they might not agree with you, they at least recognize that you're talking about a different system. The problem with mutualists is they will then assert that their model of economy, despite it not being based on social need, despite it being based on exchange power and capital, they'll claim that it's socialist, and they'll use some arbitrary definition, and they won't allow for you to define socialism as an economy based on social need. And so if I say the word capitalism, it makes so much sense to say, oh well, that's just an economy where capital is what drives economic activity. Capitalism, it makes perfect sense. But socialism, I'm meant to believe, is exactly the same thing except with worker co-ops. Or instead of using regular money, you use these special mutualist money that is arguably better than regular money, sure, but just being slightly better than what we have now isn't how you define socialism. If the entire economy is still going against social need because it's elevating affordability and exchange above whether people actually need a thing, how can you call something socialist if it's contradictory to socialism? It's contradictory to socialism. It's contradictory to an economy where social need drives economic activity. And the only way you can make sure that it's social need that drives economic activity is if there are no other incentives for economic activity. If exchange is an incentive for your economic activity, then that's how you calculate your rationing for whether to produce or not. Because if you need exchange power to get the things you need, then you're going to also offer your goods and services and labor in exchange for that exchange power. It's the same way of doing an economy as capitalism. Do labor or produce something to exchange it for something else, to exchange that for the thing you need. It's the same fundamental gameplay loop, mechanism as capitalism. Just because you have a few more regulations, just because it's not full-blown rich people get to decide everything, and rather it's the markets will decide, or people's needs will be met because we'll have things for exchange, and then people will exchange it, and magically everyone will have enough exchange power for what they need. It's ridiculous and fantasy thinking. Okay, now it's an enemy of socialism because those people who are obsessed with, fans of, or miseducated enough to believe that mutualism is socialist, they're going to stop asking, is this economy best for social need? They've already written off social need. Social need is no longer part of the equation, because if it was, then they would cancel markets and cancel exchange. Those things offer no value to society. They don't meet any social needs. They are literally just mechanisms and ways for inequality to develop. They are ways to establish class and maintain class. And even if you have fancy regulations to keep inequality at a minimum, you're still participating in, perpetuating, and building an economy where inequality is built into it. It's part of the definition, because some people are going to be able to exchange for the things they need and others aren't. The person who is not able to work, maybe they have a disability, maybe they are super depressed or whatever, they won't be able to labor or make things because they're struggling themselves, so they won't have exchange power, and so their needs aren't important. It's an ableist economy, and it's the very same problem of capitalism. Now, capitalism, as we know it today, is deregulated to a large degree, whereas mutualism is a set of regulations that tries to make an exchange economy less problematic, but it doesn't get rid of exchange, it doesn't get rid of inequality, it doesn't get rid of class, it doesn't get rid of the problem. And so it stops people from learning about socialism. Because if you go into the public forum or something and you be like, yo, let's build socialism, everybody. Let's get this going. Let's get an economy that meets social needs started. And then all the mutualists rock in and be like, oh yeah, let's totally do this. Then we'll have an exchange economy, we'll have markets, and we'll totally be meeting social need. And then you're like, okay, but what if someone doesn't have exchange power for the thing they need? Well, that's when the mutualists think that they've got it all figured out. No. Basic necessities like food, water, shelter, those kinds of things, well, we'll make sure those are free. We'll do those according to who needs them. But if you want something more, if you want a computer, a cell phone, a lawnmower, who draws the line between what's a basic need and a luxury need? I don't know. I guess it's up to the hand of the market. I don't know. How do you decide? Because for some people, something may be a luxury, and for other people, it may be a necessity. No way of knowing, because as soon as for one person it's not a necessity, then suddenly, well, now it shouldn't be given to them for free. It should be exchanged. They should do a capitalism, but call it mutualism because it's a worker co-op. And all this mutual credits, not real money. So do the whole exchange thing. And if you can't, well, shit, your needs don't get met. Sorry. This is socialism. Your needs don't get met under socialism, remember? Oh wait, why is that not making sense? And it's literally makes it like almost impossible to really define and build a movement for socialism, because every time you try to talk to people about what the economy should look like, well, you got some people saying it should be based on social need, you got other people saying it should be based on affordability, and then you got other people saying, well, some stuff should be need, some stuff should be affordability, and well, it's not really important that dividing the two is problematic. It'll just work out, don't worry. Everything will work out fine. That's the mantra of markets. Oh, it'll work out, don't worry. We know that there's potential for extreme abuse and exploitation, but it won't happen because trust us. No, give us logical reasons why you need exchange in the economy. What value is it adding, and why the heck do you think it's socialist? What makes you think chaining people to something like a market that is literally going to gatekeep them away from the things they need is a good idea? And one of the biggest reason I think why mutualists are as confused as they are is because they actually don't understand socialism. They don't understand, they can't imagine how things like luxuries could be provided for free. And then they take that lack of imagination, lack of knowledge, lack of understanding, and they say, oh well, it must be impossible. We must fall back to what we know. We must continue to do things the way we do them now. No, let's not try and solve the question of how to distribute luxury goods. Let's leave it up to exchange. Let's chain people to an exploitative mechanic so that we don't have to answer the question, because somehow that's better than actually answering for who actually needs stuff. If you have 7 billion people and you only have 7 million cell phones, well, that's a 1 to 1,000 ratio. Well, how do we solve that? Well, if you're a mutualist, haha, don't worry, only 1 million people will get a cell phone, and they'll just have to work to get exchange power, and then the ones who really want it, they'll be the ones who spend it. And the people who have other costs, the people who might need to buy medicine and all of that stuff with their money and not get a cell phone, well, oh well, they chose the wrong thing, or oh, they have different priorities, because not everyone deserves a cell phone, only people who can afford it. It's absolute nonsense. The people who need to get medicine and who have the disabilities, they probably need a cell phone even more than everyone else. But no, we're doing a mutualism, and we're not open to any economy where people are able to get their needs met because it's a need. No, we need an economy that privileges those who are able to produce, privileges those who have exchange power. They're the ones who get their needs met. It's literally creating class. In a socialist economy, it's free, even a luxury item, because it's based on social need. From the beginning of the process, from getting the resources out of the ground, to refining them, to building component parts, to manufacturing, to distribution, all of it happens for free. There's no exchange, there's no cost. And the reason why it can happen for free is because it's all happening for free. It's a web, it's like self-reinforcing. Either you're all doing it in your economy or none of you are doing it. Because if one person starts wanting an exchange along the route of producing this item, then everyone after them in the supply chain is going to have a cost to producing what they want to produce, and they're going to also have to offer it for exchange. It's like a virus. It infects your economy and turns it into exchange the second you introduce exchange at one point in the supply chain. And if you put the exchange all the way at the end of the supply chain, well, now it's just arbitrary, and now, it's like the people that can finish the product are privileged against those who might only be able to get it halfway there. It's nonsense. Where's need in that? Where are we considering need? The reason why you don't have a market, the reason why you don't have exchange, is so that you force economic activity to be based on social need. So if people don't think there's a need for something to be made, it doesn't get made. If people think that they can exchange something for something else, they'll make it, even if the exchange never happens. They've produced and then it never gets used, and they still calculated correctly according to their economy because they thought that they could exchange it. And so exchange corrupts your economy. It makes it not about whether people need it, and it makes it about whether they can afford it. And what you need is a cooperative economy instead of a competitive one. When you've got exchange, it becomes competitive, because if two people produce the same thing and only one of those things is needed, only one of those people will get the exchange, and only one of them will then have that exchange power to then go and meet their needs. And that forces people to compete with each other over making that exchange. It's a competitive economy. It's literally just capitalism light. We need a cooperative economy where the only reason that stuff gets made is because people agree to cooperate to make it, not for what they can individually get out of it, but because cooperating allows everything to be free, which allows nobody to charge for it, nobody needs exchange, and so that everybody can then offer what they do for free. So it's like two incompatible ways of producing things, and to try and combine them is ludicrous. Like, if you are making batteries for free, you say, oh, batteries aren't a luxury, batteries are definitely a basic necessity. Well, then someone who puts a light on a battery and charges for it, now they can take a battery for free, put a light on it, and get exchange. And they've basically exploited the free supply of battery in order to make exchange, rather than the whole thing being free. They take the free battery, they put a light on it that they got for free, and they offer the light on the battery for free. And then other people who need a light on a battery no longer need to exchange for it, no longer need to take the battery and lights independently and put them together themselves. They need a light with a battery, they get a light with a battery, because the person putting lights on batteries got the batteries for free, got the lights for free, and is in turn doing it for free. That's socialism, not exchange. And mutualism just prevents that from happening by getting people to think they've solved the problem when they've only solved half of it. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.